to briefly introduce Susan, who's been hugely instrumental to the world of art jewelry for decades. As both a gallerist for many years and having that very important perspective on the field from working in that capacity, Susan is also a board member of CCA and a founding member of Art Jewelry Forum, which has been truly instrumental in bringing art jewelry to the forefront in terms of the art world today. So she has a great perspective that she's going to be giving us and a long friendship with Joyce, so a lot of personal insight. And so thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. As Joyce said in this, slightly paraphrasing a bit differently, she said, I hope that that when you look at jewelry, you carry something home that might change you, even if it's subliminal. Joyce hopes that art does this, and I hope, in talking about Joyce, that some of her magic will rub off on you. Now, if I were Joyce right now giving this talk, I would burst into a loud gospel song. But given that I'm an aging white woman, I'll spare you the attempt. But you can just try and imagine Joyce singing. So, here's Joyce. She's posing for a MacArthur grant photo in this picture. She got this grant in 2016. And here she is draped in her favorite color, purple, with colorful surroundings all around, wearing a red turquoise beaded necklace. And you can see all the beadwork that's within the picture as well as on her. So she just sits there like a princess on a pillow, or maybe on a lily pad floating in a sea of color, wearing the beautiful necklace. This is the Joyce you saw in the video. She's definitely a powerful personality. This is the front page of the New York Times art section. And there's Joyce Scott, the jeweler. She's also a sculptor and a performance artist and other things, but she is on the front page of the New York Times. And I make a big deal about this because I don't know about you, but I have never seen a jeweler on the front page of the New York Times section. So how did she get here? Well, I don't know the whole story, but all I can tell you is that she was her authentic self throughout and a hard-working, tough artist. She's loud, ballsy, sly, hilarious, but you know, underneath all of that big personality is a quiet persistence of a person who's determined to make things change and to use art to do it. To make you aware of the things that are wrong in the world, to make you aware of how she, as an African-American woman, sees the world, to tell the truth. She makes sculpture and jewelry. I will concentrate on her jewelry today since it's here that I think you can see the surprising way that she's subverted this decorative form of craft to say something and carry meaning. I don't mean to get into a big description of what jewelry is or does here, but suffice it to say that jewelry has carried meanings like memories or status within a specific culture for a very long time. But to carry the expression or statement from an artist is relatively new. Joyce was born in Baltimore, as she said, and still lives there, as she said, until recently when her mother passed away. She took care of her until she died, and it's in an all-black working-class neighborhood where she's lived since she was little. Her parents were from Carolina, cotton and tobacco pickers, and they moved north for better jobs. She said she had a typical Black American upbringing with supportive parents. She's descendants of African Americans, Native Americans, and Scots. 3 generations of storytellers, quilters, basket makers, and wood, metal, and clay workers who all inspire her work. Joyce's earliest art lessons were received at home, or as she said, in the womb, as she watched her mother, the renowned fiber artist Elizabeth Telford Scott, create quilts using unconventional embroidery and applique techniques. I hope you will see during this talk how Joyce has broken through boundaries, quite a few of them. There's hardly any African Americans who joined the American craft studio movement. There's a lot of talented makers in the Hispanic and Black populations, but they either didn't go to the right schools that fed the field, or they opted to join smaller or more local organizations. But Joyce found her way in and remains as one of the small number of African Americans in the field. She also chose to become a jeweler. Traditionally, jewelry might have denoted status with a crown or a wedding ring, or carried a keepsake from a loved one, or just added sparkle to your outfit, but rarely did it carry an artist statement. But Joyce broke that barrier too with her commentary. This kind of art is rarely mentioned in the mainstream, but you saw her on the front page of the New York Times art section. This is kind of amazing, kind of legitimizing craft and in particular jewelry. Of course, the paper could lead with the MacArthur that she got and the sculpture she was doing, but still it did mention she was a jeweler, so there was that. Anyway, she broke all these boundaries, and I hope to show you by what she's done, how she did that. Now I'm just going to jump into some images of some of the most disturbing jewelry you'll probably ever see. Joyce says, "I make jewelry to be worn, and if it's about scary, icky subjects, then so much the better for the person who has the cojones to wear it in public." This is the first of 4 pieces I'm going to show that's part of the Jonestown series. They were the first pieces of jewelry I saw that made me understand how powerful and political jewelry could be. How it could say something meaningful and express an emotional truth in a very daring response to a tragedy that took place in the Jonestown commune in Ghana. Joyce has depicted the story of this massacre with extremely painful images in the form of 4 brooches at a very early time in her career. Just to remind you, the Jonestown massacre took place in 1978, and a total of 918 people died in Ghana at a commune organized by Jim Jones from the People's Temple, which was in San Francisco in the 1960s. It was a church with an alleged Christian creed, but was actually based on an underlying communist doctrine. The distressing event was a mass murder or a mass suicide, according to some people. Jim Jones called a revolutionary suicide, and it was the result of his paranoid mental state, drug use, and declining health, as well as his worry about an exposure of his religious communist community. It's not incidental that Jim Jones was white and the majority of his followers were black. The whole horrific story was broadcast around the world when the white congressman, Leo Ryan, and 5 others were shot on the landing strip near the compound. And it was because of this murder that Jones completely freaked out and instructed his followers to drink the poisonous Kool-Aid. Of course, everyone at the time heard about this horrible disaster, including Joyce. She said, "I made these works to exorcise the rage and despair I felt after reading about this tragedy." She couldn't believe that this many people would so easily give up their precious life because someone told them to. She says these brooches are meant as a quartet. They occupy the 4 corners of the experience. All 4 of these brooches are very large. They're about 10 inches high by 5 inches wide. They're really big. This one is called The White Boy's Gone Crazy. It's a human figure made of tree bark with bone extremities. Its head is a photograph of Jim Jones haloed with beading, while a picture of Congressman Ryan, who's threatened to expose Jim Jones, is crudely cross-stitched on the chest. Hands are reaching out to Ryan's image as if hoping for help. Over the genitalia is a photo of a cup they drank the poison from. Over the belly is a single-edged razor blade. The figure is pierced by innumerable stick pins with beaded heads. The violence of this piece explicitly recalls macumba, a blend of Christianity and voodoo, widespread in northern Brazil. Razor blades are important in macumba ceremonies to separate the soul from its ties to earth. Joyce intended that this piece put an end completely to Jim Jones's body and soul, so he would never, ever come back. This next slide is called Double Cross, and it takes the form of a cross with a figure hanging on it made up of pig knuckle bones wired together. Its head is a photo of a person crying out, surrounded by beading. Heart shape hangs over the heart. There's a beaded rosary hanging around the figure. The cross itself seems to be a combination of a budded cross, which is the little ends on each one of the 3 ends, which symbolizes an immature Christian or someone who's new to the faith. And then the round part is more like a Celtic cross, which symbolizes eternity. Joyce considered the shape of the cross with this intention, and these 2 meanings seem to add a poignancy to the piece. The title Double Cross also refers to the double cross Jim Jones played on the innocent souls who followed his orders to drink the poison that killed them, or the double cross he played by enticing them to follow him to a new spiritual life that in reality led to their death. This next one is called KOOL AIDE KOCKTAIL, and refers to the way in which the followers were killed. Cyanide was mixed with Kool-Aid in metal tubs, and they were told to drink it. This brooch shape is defined by a photograph of one of those metal tubs, which appears to be a large washing tub in which the poison punch was mixed. On top of this, she superimposes a cutout photo of a dead person in a fetal position, as though floating in the tub, tied up with crisscrossed thread. The whole thing is coated in clear plastic as if to preserve it in amber, then rimmed with 131 tiny bright red beads and fringed with stiff, straight, dark brown hair. The hair gives it a kind of scary vibrational halo. Keep away. Joyce says, to give this jolly drink to your children, knowing you were poisoning them, just shows how far from reality many of these followers were. There were those who refused to drink too, but were forced. This fourth and last piece is called For the Souls. It's made up of 3 lumps of black stones encased in shiny plastic, dangling from a larger stone shape on which is mounted a tiny silver frame with a black baby's face, one of the innocents massacred. Stones in some traditions are placed on graves to keep the spirits from rising up, or in others it's said that stones are made up from crushed souls. Some Africans who were taken as slaves swallowed stones so that they could bring some of their land with them when they were taken. And Joyce says, these souls are floating over Ghana because when you die of violence, your soul cannot rest. The themes she explores with the Jonestown series are racial, political, and religious, but more than that, they are simply pointing to a terrible human tragedy that occurred 2 years before she made the work. Her references to Christ, to voodoo, and to black babies indicates the elements of the story that speak strongly to her. She was raised in an apostolic Pentecostal faith and so developed strong spiritual roots. This faith was mixed with African religion and theatrical rituals. That plus her time in Mexico, where she studied in an MFA program, and her travels in South America would have logically led to her use of the Christ figure and the voodoo pins. Joyce's whole career has been to act as a strong voice to speak out against injustices, often with pieces of jewelry. Now on to a little lighter work, a little lighter theme. Joyce received her MFA in crafts from the Instituto de Allende in Mexico in 1971. This next piece is called Virgin Guadalupe. Joyce is using a variety of Mexican images. The Virgin of Guadalupe is a patron saint of Mexico, and there she is in a green robe, hands clasped in prayer, and a little baby putti at her feet holding her up. So you can see Joyce's necklace and then another version of the Virgin Guadalupe. You can see the little putte a little bit better at the bottom. Of course, we also have a devil as a counterbalance to the Virgin, and some skeletons from the Mexican tradition of celebrating of the Day of the Dead and the spirits of ancestors. Joyce thinks of the Virgin as an emanation or a source of opportunity. It can be a spirit of truth, which you can choose to listen to or not. For her, it's a beacon that can help guide her. She's used the Virgin in numbers of other pieces as well. You know, multiculturalism has always been a part of and is constantly present in Joyce's work. And in the 1960s, in American studio craft, there was an involvement with the World's Crafts Council and other organizations that tried to explore, or shall we say, exploit the global dimensions of handmade objects. Craft had the possibility of bringing together third world and first world objects and artists and cultures. The American craftsperson feels a kinship with others around the world who use their hands to make objects. This has created a certain sense of understanding based on the language, for example, of beads. The craftsperson doesn't need to know the actual language, let alone the customs or traditions of the other person from a different culture, to sit down and bead with them. In fact, in one-on-one exchanges between the two makers, there's a possibility of learning about new techniques, new processes, without speaking. This non-political, non-sociological exchange is a foundational value of craft. People from all backgrounds can meet and learn from each other. There's a quality about stitching the beads that's meditative, and the space where it's made can be sacred for everyone involved. This necklace, which is here in the show, includes a big blue Buddha head, and like the Virgin in the previous necklace, Joyce often uses the Buddha in her jewelry and her sculpture. Buddha is a symbol of enlightenment and wisdom. He represents an ideal state of intellectual and ethical perfection. I don't know if Joyce actually meditates, but as I said, the process of beading creates a meditative state that gives the restlessness of her nature time to rest. It slows her frenetic energy down enough to think more deeply about issues she cares about, and also just to make some more exceptional art. This piece, which is also right here in the show, is called Bird Trapped in Shadows. It's from 1981, so it's another early piece of hers. And this one, along with the Jonestown series, was in an exhibition called The Eloquent Object from 1987. In the catalog, her necklaces were described like this. Scott's talismanic necklaces and beadwork are ritual objects, at once rich with historical legacy and dream images, and also charged with a vigorous emotional life. In this sense of celebration and vitality, mystery and passion that conjoins the process of beadwork and the beaded image, the process becomes the image on more than the literal level. Beadwork is committed, single-minded, obsessive activity, the indomitable will set to beaded patterns. The life force that pours hours of tedium into this art form is robust and alive in the sparkling, vital image that results. Phew, that's quite a lot to claim. But anyway, in this necklace, she combines the beadwork with found objects. There's a silver bird, a silver fox pouncing, a photograph of a little boy who looks Asian, and the silhouette of a black woman. Joyce has also used a lot of different beads and kinds of beads very energetically. There are parts that look like they refer to African, tribal, or Native American patterns with random figures and obscure references to other bodies and ornamentation. What does this mean? Well, I can only guess that the title refers to the duality of worlds, to the real world of the boy and the shadow world of the woman. The black woman and the little Asian child maybe are trapped like the silver bird caught in the web of stitches as they're caught in the web of our culture. Joyce is still learning about how to use the peyote stitch at this time. This is pretty early on in her career. So she's trying to figure out which small objects to add in and which ones to leave out. This one, which also I'm surprised is in this show, I sort of didn't know which things were in the show, or maybe I did, but I wanted to show this one called Ancestry, Progeny from 2014 to make a quick comment about another aspect of Joyce's work that's unusual. How often do you see figures in jewelry? Any kind of jewelry. They're often animals, but rarely people. By this addition of people in her work, it does allow her to make statements she otherwise couldn't make. And I think people are the thing that Joyce is really the most interested in generally. She loves people. Here we're looking at what I assume are Joyce's ancestors, since we see a black, red, and yellow person with photographs of a white man and woman, and I think an African American at the bottom. She comes from these people. She's connected to the lineage. This one's called Election Day, another colorful and quite beautiful necklace. Joyce says that a lot of younger people she knows don't vote. They don't think it's worth their effort because everything is rigged. They've become cynical about the American political process, and of course, who can blame them? Joyce votes and realizes it's the only way we can make our voices heard in the mix of all the other voices. This necklace shows people of all colors who will be part of that mix. That is the American dream. This piece is a dream of what could be, of what Joyce would like it to be. People of all colors go out to vote together. The faces are interspersed with decorative, festive beadwork, which might refer to the tradition of getting dressed up when you go out to vote. Or it could just be some fun that Joyce is having with her beads. She's not always serious in making political statements. Sometimes she just loves the color and variety of the beads. You heard Joyce talk about being from her community. So she's interested in her neighborhood and her community. She's lived in Baltimore all her life, and she very strongly believes that she should engage in it. She's watched it change over time and become more neglected, so she wants to do something to revive it. The dark blue shape with the white outline of a hand I take to be a raised fist or power to the people. In other words, that political action can change the course of your community. Joyce has a reputation for reaching out to others to make sure they can participate with her in shows, such as this one, which is what she did in this case, and that they're given a chance to become who they want to be. She feels she was given these kinds of opportunities by people before her, and she wants to pass that on now to others. She's very generous that way. Here's another beautiful necklace in this show, with swirling, churning bodies and waves of blue beads engulfing them. Although I'm saying this is beautiful, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have some kind of meaning. This one is charged with meaning and should make you stop and question what's going on here. It's called PEEPING REDUX, meaning the peeping revisited or revived. There's a large white male head in the upper right-hand corner and made 2, maybe 3 brown bodies in their underwear or bathing suits, tossed around in the waves of blue. One figure seems to be pointing at the white head, and of course it's easy to read this as a Peeping Tom reference. So again, not a topic you traditionally see in a piece of jewelry, but a gorgeous necklace with an impressive amount of beadwork delivering another unnerving story. You could imagine having an interesting conversation over this one, I'm sure. This one you saw little patches of in the video. This is called Joyce's Necklace. It's a bit unusual for Joyce because it was a necklace she made for herself and she often wore. I say unusual because she would sometimes collage small objects into a necklace, but never so many. One day when I saw her wearing it, I asked her if she would be willing to part with it since I found it incredibly powerful and talismanic, which I love. To my surprise, she said yes, so now it's in my collection. It's filled with lots of small bone, silver, and wood objects. There are faces, skulls, figures, as well as a very wide variety of colors and shapes of beads and glass. It's so incredibly energetic and filled with talismanic strength. It's a shield, a protector for the wearer. Many of the small objects have been used in other cultures for these purposes, and by adding them in such great numbers, she has increased the magic for herself. She says it's actually a diary of people and places. And remember how she talked about quilts also being a history? I think this necklace is really like a quilt in that way. It's from the 1970s, where she's still learning how to use peyote stitch and what to do with the beads. It isn't a political statement, but it's another excellent example of a way that jewelry can be used. It's not about communicating to the viewer, but about communicating to the wearer. Jewelry has played this role over the centuries, and Joyce, or anyone really who's Black in America, needs protection. This necklace is called All Are Free, None Are Free. A brown woman is grabbed by a large hand that seems to be part of a large brown face in the upper part of the necklace. The woman is wrapped in chains, indicating that she's not free. But to try to understand what this necklace is about would be a conversation. Does it mean none are free unless all are free? Or is it just a statement that all are free and none are free? It's a bit enigmatic, so it would be a good necklace to wear if you wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with others through the jewelry object. It's easy to respond to, and it can be used as a touchstone to start a conversation. It's easy because it's been seen as adornment on your body, so it isn't threatening, but it can deal with threatening topics. I quoted Joyce earlier when she stated that it takes cojones to wear jewelry, and this certainly would be an example of that. You would have to be prepared for confrontation if you wore it. So, if you thought the last necklace might be hard to wear, look at this one. This necklace you might guess is called Holocaust from 2013. There's an obvious swastika and numerous stars of David interwoven with patterns, including one woven into the swastika itself. There are little eyes watching in several locations, and to top it off, on the upper left-hand side of the necklace, we see an emaciated figure burning in flames. I challenge any of you, especially if you're Jewish, to imagine wearing this out to a gala, or in fact anywhere. It takes cojones. So why does Joyce make these difficult topics in jewelry? I think she just does it because she doesn't want to shy away from everything in life, the horror and the beauty. She wants the balance of it, the reality of it. She's alive and filled with an electrifying power to make this kind of a statement in a form that people are attracted to. She wants you to engage with the beauty of the beads before you realize that you're looking at an image that you don't want to really be looking at. She's really sly that way. So just to renew, Joyce has busted many boundaries. The one of color, she's one of very few African-American craftspeople that are visible to us. Busted the acceptable topics for jewelry. She'd busted into the MacArthur Genius Award world as a jeweler, and she's broken through the prejudices of the New York Times front page of the art section. Yes. So she says, being an artist is a political statement. After all, in a world where families can't feed their kids and people are homeless, to choose to be an artist is a political act. I'm not a superhero, an alchemist, or a saint. just me. Thank you. So that wasn't exactly a story about, or topics about, my relationship with Joyce as a gallerist, which is kind of the way the talk was introduced. But that was just more like my looking and learning from Joyce about how to read her work. And so if you have any questions or want to talk more about Joyce and what she's done and does and whatever, I'll try and answer them if I can.
How did you first meet, and how did the relationship develop?
How did I first meet? That is such a good question. You know, I had a gallery that was showing American jewelry, and it was really, she was somebody who was around showing, and I'm sure somebody said to me, have you ever seen Joyce's work? And when I saw it, I thought, this is kind of amazing, very unusual and different than most anything else I was showing. And, you know, then Joyce is just such a personality. I mean, she's really just a big personality, and so you meet her and you really are very impressed. And I used to show some of her sculptural work too, not only her jewelry. And I know that at like some of the fairs that I would do and so forth, there were people who were quite interested in supporting her. I mean, I think surprisingly, she sells work like this, which I think is, you know, pretty amazing to say about the audience too.
How large was the piece that you acquired?
Well, it covers your whole chest basically. Yeah, it's pretty big. Right now it's in New Zealand at an exhibition there, otherwise it would be here. But it was just, you know, an amazing thing. And the thing that I regret more than anything is that when I had the gallery, I couldn't afford to buy work very much. And so many of the good pieces of Joyce's jewelry that I sold, now I would love to be having in my collection, but I sold it. But two of the pieces by somebody who bought them from me are in this show too. So.
I have this question, I'm not sure how to say it, but it's about wearability, it's about work that isn't worn but is displayed, and I'm wondering if you have any insight into how Joyce feels about that, and the people who collect her work, do they intend to actually wear these pieces? Or do they intend to display it?
Well, there's somebody in the audience wearing one.
I know they're functionally wearable.
Yeah, very functionally wearable. I mean, I think Joyce makes things to be worn. I mean, I don't think she makes them not to be worn. I think she really wants people to wear them. I think she also does understand she's making some that would be extremely hard to wear. But again, she knows there's some people out there who might have the kahunas, as she says, to do that. And then there's tons of ones she makes, though, that are just purely beautiful and decorative and really not hard to wear at all. And in fact, very easy to wear. They're light. They're easy to put on and off. I mean, there's nothing challenging about wearing Joyce's work, really, except for the topics.
Thank you.